So many actors jump into this industry before learning the rules. Then they get frustrated, and before you know it, they've left the industry. Let's talk about how to avoid this premature burnout. Everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Tape here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. Here she comes. Okay, so this is not a new idea, but it sort of crystallized for me over the last week as there was a confluence of different ideas from different parts of my life. Let me explain. So it's Easter as I'm recording this. He is risen. But many Christians don't actually know that Easter is a 50-day season and not a singular day where we celebrate the mystery of a bunny laying chocolate eggs. But let's talk about sports, specifically baseball. I still have no idea what constitutes a win for a pitcher versus a loss versus a save. It just seems beyond understanding. In football, I know a lot of the rules, but I still don't know what a defensive end does or is, or the rule of when there's too many men in the backfield. It just seems like a surprise when it happens. But for those sports analogies, there's no consequence to me not knowing these rules because I'm just a spectator. I have no stake in the game. Now, for religion, if you're religious, there's a little bit more at stake for not understanding the fundamentals of your religion. But let's talk about acting. What do I even mean by rules? Well, broadly speaking, if you've never taken a class or watched a behind-the-scenes video with a director or an in-depth interview with an actor or casting director, etc., well then, what are you doing? You're going to be chewed up and spit out by this industry. So you should either go do something else with your life, and no shade for doing that, or put on your big boy pants and start to invest your time and resources in learning. The rules cover everything from the craft of acting to the history of that craft, the art of movie making and the history of that art, the very real rules of contracts, how the process of casting works, and so on and so on and so on. If you want to be a television and film actor, there are so many things to learn. And as we talked about last week on this channel, you can scour YouTube channels like this one for free information. We have over 5 years worth of free videos on this channel alone. You should also check out people like Kurt Yu, who has the Acting Career Center on YouTube. I'll link him in the show notes below. Or you can pay someone to teach you these things in a condensed format in either a class or workshop setting. But no matter how you approach it, you must learn the foundational rules of this business. Somehow, some way. Why? Well, we deal with the consequences of this every day at Get Taped. You ever heard the phrase, the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law? Well, in the beginning of learning this business or how to drive, you need to first learn the letter of the law. What does the actual rule say? But if you do your due diligence and commit yourself to learning this business, you start to understand the spirit of the law or of those rules or guidelines. See, if you don't learn the letter of the law first and then come to understand the spirit of the law, well, then you'll never develop the discernment of when it's appropriate to bend or break those rules. Let's get specific. Let's say you get an audition that has taping instructions that go on for days, which seems to be the norm. And for the framing, it specifically says top of the head to around the clavicle or shoulders or chest or whatever. So that's the letter of the law, to essentially frame it the way I am framed right now. And a lot of you understand that letter of the law and then live in fear of that, or live in fear of that casting office. Because let's say that you're auditioning for a cop who enters the room, clearing the room, and then dodges a few bullets, apprehends a suspect, and drags them out of the shot. Well, this frame that I'm in right now is way too close for that. There's too much energy and physicality in my character to contain it in this tight of a frame. But again, if you don't understand the spirit of that law, then you're going to live in fear of that casting office, and you're going to tell me, who is taping you at Get Taped, no, they want it really close. And so then you're either bouncing around that frame looking ridiculous, or you're standing so still as you navigate the scene and it's not the appropriate energy or physicality for the audition. With a little learning, though, you can come to understand the spirit of the law, the spirit of that rule of please frame all of your auditions around here. Very briefly, some actors have absolutely zero understanding of how to compose a shot, an image. And 15 plus years ago, that would be understandable because largely all auditions were in person. So you would get a pass because you were never in charge of the frame. That wasn't in your purview. You were just an actor. But now there are no excuses. Since 2020, every actor has had to learn how to do self-taping, either at home or by coming to a service like Get Taped. Here in Atlanta, we've been doing self-tapes since 2005. Yeah, so we don't have any excuses. And on top of that, everyone has taken a selfie before, or dozens or hundreds or even thousands over the years. So, there's really no excuse to not understanding how to frame yourself in a flattering way. And yet actors be crazy. All one has to do is cast your own short film and solicit self-tapes from actors, either on Actors Access or other platforms. You will quickly understand where that spirit of the law comes from in terms of framing your auditions. Because actors will submit videos where they look like Muppets, or they'll be really far away in almost a full body shot, and they're either talking really loud or you can barely hear them because they're so far away from the dang microphone. There are things you could never possibly imagine that will end up in your inbox as you watch these self-tapes. So you will quickly realize why there are these self-taping guidelines. It will dawn on you that it's not that casting must have you frame that way for every audition. No, it's to give newer folks guidelines that they can understand so that there's at least some sort of reasonable consistency across all the auditions that they receive. And after you understand that, not just the letter of the law, the thing that you're living in fear of right now, but the spirit of that rule, that guideline, then you must be empowered to figure out when it's appropriate to adjust that framing for this show, this scene, this character, etc. Make sense? And hopefully it also makes sense why casting can't trust the average beginner actor to make those decisions for themselves. Thus, they give you these rules to live by. And sometimes, yes, even your agent will strike fear into you if you're not following the rules. Because if you have not learned yet the discernment of when it is appropriate to bend that law because of the context of the scene or the character or the show, etc., then you shouldn't be bending or breaking that rule or that law. You should be following it to the letter because you haven't earned the right yet to bend it, to break it, because you haven't done the work. You haven't learned. And this isn't just for taping instructions for auditions. This extends to every corner of this industry and every discipline within this industry. Heck, if you're a writer, then you've taken a class where you learn the hero's journey story wheel or the traditional 3-act structure, and you'll be forced to live in those guidelines, to learn the letter of that law before you start to realize the spirit of it and why it works. And then as you get more ideas and get more creative, but you've learned the discipline of the letter of that law, then you start to understand when it's appropriate to bend that to your specific context. So there's a theme here. First, you need to learn the rules, learn the very strict rules that are put in place for a reason. But then once you've learned that, and then you come to understand the spirit of those rules, then you can start to personalize. Then you can feel empowered to make your own choices, moment to moment, project to project, audition to audition. Now, before I finish, some rules are not meant to be broken. If you saw the short that I put up on YouTube a couple days ago, I illuminated how many union actors still think that if they're living or working in a right to work state, that they can work off the card, that they can do non-union projects. That is only true if you're FICOR. If you're a union member in good standing, you can't break that rule. That's why it's called Global Rule 1. And it's why you're labeled a scab if you decide to willingly work off the card. So it's just ignorance to that fundamental rule that actors are auditioning and then working on these projects because they think they can, because it's a right to work state. So they haven't even learned the letter of the law. They think they're actually doing something okay, but they haven't done the actual work to understand the contract itself and that you can't break that rule. Hopefully you get the point. It's great to want to be in a movie one day, or if you've been doing this for a bit, to want to make insurance, or if you've been doing it longer, to call this your life's work. But whatever your goals are, you won't last more than a couple years if you aren't able to develop this discernment. And that discernment comes from a persistence and a rigorous discipline. And all of that stems from first respecting this art form, respecting those that came before and pioneered it, respecting both the show and the business side of this industry. Y'all, this journey ain't easy, and it definitely ain't glamorous. If this video bummed you out, well, sorry, not sorry. Too many folks step into this industry thinking it's going to be quick and easy. And even when you hear some of your favorite actors do interviews where it took them 10, 20, 30 years to break out, or you hear someone like Sanford Meisner say that it'll take you 20 years to understand this craft of acting, doesn't matter to you because you know you're different, that you're destined for something bigger, that maybe you're even entitled to your shot. You think that somehow you can just skip reading the manual and figure it out yourself. And then a pandemic hits, and then a dual strike, and then a complete upending of the entire industry. And you wonder why you're suddenly frustrated. Maybe not suddenly, maybe you've been frustrated or disillusioned or desperate or angry or just plain old burnt out. So hang in there if you can and drop your thoughts below. Have you gotten to a point in your career where you have developed that discernment of the spirit of the law, of the rule? If you have a specific example, I'd love to hear it, so drop a comment below. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.